It's Christmas Eve. You're walking along the old lane that runs next to the pub. The bitter cold wind bites at your fingers. You hear a noise in the distance that sounds like horses trotting. Moments later, a black carriage pulled by two horses rushes past and then disappears into the mist. You've just seen the legendary Victorian horse and hearse. If legend is correct, you'll die within the year. Welcome to Ghost Tales by the Fireside. I am Clem Dalloway, and I'll be telling you about the hauntings of Foxhall Idiot, an ancient part of Redditch that originates from medieval times. This episode should have been released on Christmas Eve, but unfortunately I've had COVID-19, and I've still got the effects now, so my chest isn't too great. I do apologise if my voice doesn't come out too well. Foxhall Idiot is in the district of Webheath in Redditch, Worcestershire. The name originates from the swing gate that would have been used by local fox hunters since the early part of the medieval period. In the 18th century, a pub called the Fox and Goose stood on the Bromsgrove Turnpike, and on the opposite side of the road was a mansion that was built in 1840 by Richard Hemming, the owner of a local needle factory, whose wife Sarah bought 3 houses on the site in 1781. In April 1939, the publican of the Fox and Goose changed his licence to a new site that was to be erected adjoining Foxhall Idiot House, the previous mansion that belonged to the Hemming family, now known as the Foxhall Idiot. The old Fox and Goose was demolished that same year, and from 2021, the same has happened to the historic Foxhall Idiot House, to make way for new housing, even though people in the area objected to the plans. I wonder what will happen to the Hemmings family graves that are located at the back of the house, now in a small wooded area. While researching for this episode, I found an interesting newspaper article from the Ulster Chronicle on the 2nd of May, 1891. William Petford was charged with being drunk on Tuesday, while in charge of 2 horses. PC Mail stated that he saw the defendant, who was very drunk, near the Fox and Goose, Foxhall Idiot. He was so drunk that he was like they have been under the horse's hooves several times. Defendant asked the bench to be light as they could be with him. He was fined 5 shillings and 6 shillings costs. The following story was found in a book titled Worcestershire Ghosts and Hauntings by Redditch author Anne Bradford. It was Christmas Eve, and the vicar and curate of Studley were both standing in for the vicar of Tardybig. The verger of Tardybig died, and one of them would have to conduct the funeral on Boxing Day. This meant that whoever held the service would miss the Boxing Day hunt. In a fit of rage, the vicar murdered the curate. He put the body in the hearse and buried the curate in the grave that was meant for the verger. As he travelled across Redditch, passing through Crab's Cross, Headless Cross and Webheath, he was spotted by a local poacher named Bill Atwood, who was found later with his head caught in a man-trap. Local legend tells of a phantom hearse without a driver that appears on Christmas Eve when the moon is full, and whoever witnesses it will die within 12 months. Near Webheath Church on Foxhall Idiot Lane there used to stand two semi-detached cottages. On the 10th of May 1902, a violent, heavy drinker named Samuel Middleton returned home to one of the cottages after a 2-week drinking binge. His wife Hannah grew vegetables as a second income, and he knew that she'd just sold the last of the potato crop, and he wanted the money for more alcohol. Hannah refused to give him the money, and things became heated. The neighbour, a widow named Mrs. Hassel, heard them arguing, but she didn't think much about it, as it happened so regular. The shouting progressively got louder, with Hannah Middleton screaming before it went silent. Mrs. Hassel fell asleep for a while until she was woken up by the smell of smoke, which was filling her room. Both cottages were on fire, and the landlord of the Fox and Goose, Herbert Chambers, called for the Redditch Fire Brigade while neighbours rushed in to save whatever valuables they could. There was no sign of the Middletons. After the fire had been completely put out, the body of Hannah Middleton was found in the kitchen. She was fully dressed, which indicated that she hadn't gone to bed, and her head and limbs had been almost completely burnt away from the intense fire. They discovered that the fire had been started in the kitchen, as they found hay in the room that had been taken from a nearby pigsty. Samuel Middleton was found walking towards Droitwich. When asked where he was going, he replied, "Anywhere. I've killed my wife, and they'll soon catch me." After the police caught up with Samuel, he admitted that he had battered Hannah with a poker during an argument. After he realised she was dead, he set fire to the cottage in order to try and cover up the murder. He was found guilty of murder at Worcester Assizes and hanged on the 15th of July 1902. A local story tells that towards the end of the 20th century, a maid from nearby Hewell Grange in Tardebigge, now a prison, was having an affair with someone at the Fox and Goose. When the maid's husband found out, he stabbed her to death. Many people have since witnessed the White Lady of Foxhall Idiot, who has been reported walking from Hewell Grange to the Foxhall Idiot pub. In the 1980s, a teenage girl was walking out late on a cold, dark winter's evening with her friends. As they walked along the path that runs next to the Foxhall Idiot pub, she noticed a woman in the distance. As the woman approached, the girl realised that the woman was floating about 2 foot above the path. She pointed it out to her friends, who could all see the woman. They described her as wearing to a long white dress with long dark hair, with her arms stretched out in front of her. The teenagers ran home. One night in the 1990s, a family visited the Foxhall Idiot for a meal. Their 6-year-old daughter needed to use the toilet, so walked alone down the corridor towards the toilet area, where the figure of a woman suddenly walked out in front of her. The little girl wet herself and ran back to her parents. When questioned, she described her as wearing a long white dress and long black hair. People who have worked at the pub say that there's a resident ghost who they call Tom. He's believed to be the ghost of an old coachman from the time when the Hemming family owned the property. A barmaid who worked at the pub during the 1990s experienced many strange things in her time working there. One afternoon, she was getting ready to open up the bar when a glass beer tankard flew off one of the shelves and smashed over the other side of the bar. No one else was around to witness it. She was working one evening when she had to walk down the corridor that leads to the toilet and kitchen area. As she approached the toilet door, a woman walked out of the kitchen door and walked towards her, disappearing as she got closer. She described her as wearing a long white dress with long dark hair. She entered the kitchen door to tell the chef what she had seen, and the chef was stood in the far corner of the room, looking shocked. They'd seen the woman too. The following story comes from a local salsa instructor who has a background in psychology. Because of my career in the world of psychology, I usually have an explanation for the unexplained. I usually find most strange goings-on have a logical reason. Before and after this experience, I have never seen a ghost, but I am left baffled by my experience at the New Salsa's Halloween party at the Fox Lydiot on Saturday the 31st of October, 2009. During the party, 3 contestants were to be selected that had the best Halloween outfits. One contestant was an obvious choice. She was dressed as a corpse bride, wearing what I can only describe as theatrical makeup. The other contestants were a Dracula from Redditch and an Edward Scissorhands from Kidderminster. When it came to inviting the contestants forward, Dracula and Edward came forward, but there was no sign of the corpse bride. Time was filled in by playing tunes for everyone to freestyle dance while a search was launched for the third contestant. Having finally found her, the contest began. The winner was to be decided by way of audience applause. I was certain that the corpse bride would win. She had by far the spookiest outfit. The audience were invited to make some noise for the corpse bride. The result was a low-level applause and laughter. When applause was invited for Edward Scissorhands, the roof nearly came off. Dracula, a medium applause. The same procedure followed. Even less applause for the corpse bride, while everyone went nuts for Edward. The MC apologised to the corpse bride, explaining that there were many people from Kidderminster in attendance, and they clearly cheered for their friend. I remember the MC saying to the corpse bride, if it was up to him, you would be the winner. Now here is where things got strange. After the party, as I am helping collecting and clearing everything up, the New Salsa members came up to the host to say goodbye, great party, etc. Some said, why did you do that joke twice? He said, what joke? The corpse bride one. Apparently, they claimed that there was no one standing next to him, and there was only 2 contestants. However, some of the audience did see the corpse bride during the contest and during the evening. It seemed to be split 50-50. Some said we saw her, some saying that there was no one there. Because of the large crowd that came, everyone had to purchase a ticket beforehand. There was a register on the door for everyone to sign in. After the party, every ticket could easily be allocated to every member that attended, except one, the corpse bride. Her name was not signed in on the register, and I met every party attendee at the dance classes in the weeks and months that followed the party, except one, the corpse bride. Thank you for listening to Ghost Tales by the Fireside. You can log on to the Facebook page, Ghost Tales Podcast. You can also find us on Instagram, Ghost Tales Podcast. This podcast will be out monthly and is available on most podcast platforms. All music, research, writing, production, art and sound effects are all my own work.